In the name of the Father, and of the Son, the Holy Spirit. Amen. Shine in our hearts, O Master who loves mankind, the pure light of your divine knowledge, and open the eyes of our minds that we may comprehend the proclamations of your gospels. Instill in us also reverence for your blessed commandments, so that having trampled down all carnal desires, we may lead a spiritual life, both thinking and doing all those things that are pleasing to you. Christ our God, art the illumination of our souls and bodies, and to you we offer up glory, together with your Father who is without beginning, and your all holy, good, and life-creating Spirit, now and forever into the ages of ages. Amen. Okay, before we start, we have a new setup here with the microphone, so I'm going to ask Mike to explain that, how to use these, okay?
Everyone pay attention for 10. You have to like sit through the. Okay, so I'll. If I hit green right here, red right here, and then everybody can hear you like everybody on the Zoom call can hear me right now. So hopefully this makes the audio nice. And remember, I know sometimes people are shy. They could hear you before. So now they will just hear you nice and clear. And yeah. Yep. Yeah, I mean, I could do that at a later time if you want to hear yourself on the PA. We could plug that in if you want. But
I'd like to hear that.
I mean, yeah, that's what these are. These are those ones, and I got a power supply going for that. So,
thank you, Mike. Help, Father. Have a good evening. Take. Oh, okay. Let me see. All right. We're going to continue our discussion of Paul's letter to Timothy. And we're in 1 Timothy. And we're going to start with chapter 5. Chapter 5. The title here is General Pastoral Care. So again, now he's getting into the practical aspects. We're going to talk about different things that existed in the early church, look at whether they still exist today, how we deal with them today versus how we dealt with the church dealt with them in the past. Okay, so we're only going to start with verses 1 and 2 there. So Leo, I'm going to ask you to check out the mic there and start reading and make sure we can get this done right. So turn it on and let's go.
Testing.
He's practicing.
I don't have a Bible.
Minor detail, Leo. Okay, we're on page 1637, Leo. 1637. Yeah, we thought you were going to just memorize it and come on. Page 1637. Chapter 5, verses 1 and 2, general pastoral care. And then if those of you who are on Zoom, if you can make sure that put your thumbs up if you can hear Leo, this will be a help to us because we're trying to get all of you on Zoom to hear the comments made by the people here.
Do not rebuke an older man, but exhort him as a father, younger men as brothers, older women as mothers, younger women as sisters, with all purity.
Very good. Thank you, Leo. And we're starting off slow. Let's go to the question and answer. In this chapter, St. Paul gives Timothy instructions on how to deal with different groups of members in the church, beginning with the oldest first. Paul urges Timothy to embrace what in dealing with others? Humility. You always start out with humility. All right? In dealing with others. Since Timothy was a younger man, he might be tempted to what to older members. Why do you think that is a tendency in general for people? Yes, Carl. Young people think they know more, right? What else do they think about older people? Their ways are outdated. What else? Bring it on. Come on, bring it on. I can take it. They're senile. Denise, come on now. I knew it would come from you. Okay, yes, Cora. They're stuck in their ways and they're just not wise anymore. Yeah. So, uh, I remember going, I think I shared this with you, going to be a choir director. I was 25 years old up to Binghamton, New York. And in my choir, we had people, who were all different ages, but I'll never forget, I was looking at them and they were in their 60s. And I said, oh, they're not going to be around very long. So after I got to be 60 myself and then into the next decade, I realized, oh my, how stupid I was, how naive. So it's all relative. Okay, moving on. Timothy must persevere in love to win over the older men. And what should he do with them? Exhorting, not rebuking. This is very important. Exhorting, but not rebuking them as if they were his father, encouraging them to see the truth. Notice here, why is it important to view other people as one of your relatives? In this case, Timothy should look at the men as his father. He should look at the older women as his what? Mother. He should look at younger women as his sister. What is it about when you do that with a family member? How do you generally view one of your family members? Let's say with his father. How would what would you think Timothy would have for his father? Respect. All right. He'd look up to him, look to him for guidance. So if you could look at everybody like it was your father or your mother or your brother or your sister, now assuming you have good relationships with these people, I'm sorry, Kristen? Yeah, depending on the relationships. Okay. All right. Now, discuss what is the difference between exhorting someone and rebuking them? When you think of exhorting, what do you think of? Build them up? Yes, Kim.
I would say exhorting them would be like guiding them to the truth in a loving way, not like being,
Okay.
mean or.
Did you hear Kevin? Those of you on Zoom, could you hear him? Yeah. Okay. So you turned it on?
Yeah, turned it on. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're
They're listening to you, Mike. Yes, Tina. Giving them positive direction. Do something positive rather than coming down on them negative. Yes. Did you say anybody else?
You guys want to just turn all the mics on?
Yeah, let's just do that. Turn them all on. And that way everybody will be ready. Okay. Now, when you rebuke, so if that you're building up, encouraging the people, when you're exhorting them, what would be the opposite though? When you think of rebuking them, what are you doing? Putting them down. That's probably the best phrase I could think of. Putting them down. Yes, Kevin.
And I think that's only necessary when someone is teaching like heresy or,
Okay.
something that's not of the faith.
Very good. Now, even then, if you rebuke somebody, do you start out rebuking them as soon as you think that they're speaking heresy?
No.
No, why not?
Well, because you gotta first talk to them first and see what they're teaching.
Yeah, if you rebuke them right out of the gate, you're not going to have any lines of communication open. In fact, immediately, I don't know if this happens with you, when I'm in a discussion with somebody and I'm really have an opposite point of view, I'm already thinking how I'm going to answer them while they're still talking. And I'm not really listening to them.
Yeah.
And so I'm already have my answer. And have I done that with you? No. Okay, so that is what generally happens. Yes, somebody was going to say something. Tina. That's okay. Yeah, okay. If you think of it, come back with that. Yeah. Yes, Georgia. What? Yes, in other words, the words that you use to talk with them can lead to either exhorting them or rebuking them, depending on what you say, the words, and how you say it. Yes, Jose.
I was gonna say that also they may have just misspoke and you may be misinterpreting what they're saying.
Okay, say that again. Louder.
They might have misspoke and you might not really understand what they're saying. It could have just came off wrong.
Exactly. It could just come off wrong. So in other words, you want to give people the benefit of the doubt. Now, going back to Kevin's point, after you've talked with them for a half an hour or something, and they're blaspheming or something, then maybe you want to say, enough's enough. So it all depends on the situation and the person involved with that. Okay, moving on. Rebuke meant that it was to strike. Very good. Very good. To strike at. It's like you're striking, almost like hitting somebody. All right. Very good, Leo. Exhortation is encouraging to do what needs to be done. Exhortation is encouraging somebody to do what needs to be done. In other passages, Timothy is told to rebuke, but never to do it in a harsh, attacking manner. Never do it in a harsh, attacking manner. That's when everything just stops. There's no communication, no dialogue, no discussion. Right? In particular, do the old men have to offer Timothy in the church community? Georgia. Wisdom from their experiences. Very good. What else? Yes, because knowledge and experience. It goes a long way. Yes.
Like thinking like specifically in Timothy's case, since this is like the early church just being set up.
Yeah.
It's all like, like the Jews coming to Christ, and some of those like older men were, Jewish in the temple, and then the church is kind of following after the temple.
Right.
Being in that structure, they know how well, all the different temple procedures and how things work.
Yeah. So she makes a good point. Like when you think of our church, it's based on the setup for the Jewish temple too. When you have the narthex, in fact, I gave a part of my children's sermon this Sunday was on that. When Mary, it was very interesting. When you have the three parts of the temple, the back part, which is called the courtyard, that's where they where you first come in, and that's where they had the animals being sacrificed and cut up and bloody and all that. People prayed, and then you had the Holy of Holies, where the high priest could go once a year. Now, it was interesting because when Joachim and Anna brought Mary to Zechariah, how far did she go? All the way. She went into the Holy of Holies, and nobody stopped her. Nobody stopped her at 3 years old. So what happens, there were 15 steps as you go up in between there. So she goes all the way into the Holy of Holies to show that this is something special. This is meaning eventually, and what's in there, you have the Ark of the Covenant and all, and what do we have in the Holy of Holies today? The tabernacle containing the body and blood of Christ. So it's like she became what we would call the living tabernacle. She was the living tabernacle who contained Jesus Christ, and so she was allowed to go right up into the Holy of Holies. Okay. What is the importance of exhorting older women? Oh, we talked about this. Mothers, younger women, and sisters were all pure. The keys here are they are to be treated with love, honor, and respect. Think of those three things. And we should deal with those three things all the time. Love, honor, and respect. All right. Let's go on here. Mike, if you would read verses 3 to 8, please.
Honor widows who are really widows, but if any widow has children or grandchildren, let them first learn to show piety at home and to repay their parents, for this is good and acceptable before God. Now she who is really a widow and left alone trusts in God and continues in supplications and prayers night and day, but she who lives in pleasure is dead while she lives. And these things command that they may be blameless. But if anyone does not provide for his own, and especially for those of his household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever.
Okay. Strong words. Strong words. Okay. Let's go to the question and answer. St. Paul addresses the next topic, the vexed question of the office of the widow widows in the church. These were not just any widows, women who had been bereaved of their husbands, but official church widows. That is, widows the church had put on its official list. Now, this becomes important. In the days of the New Testament, in the days the New Testament was written, there was no social assistance. They did not have social assistance system set up from the government. In that day, there was one especially vulnerable class, elderly widows, who were usually without support from husbands or grown children and without means to adequately support themselves. These are those, when you hear in the scripture, called the real widows. He uses that specifically. So when we think of widows today, we don't think of widows and real widows. We don't have a church list per se that they had. Now, in exchange for their ministry, they provided a ministry of what? Solitude. The first thing was solitude and prayerful intercessions. Yeah, in a minute. The church supported them with what? Food and lodging. Okay, so go to Marcus's point. When you think of a ministry of solitude and prayerful intercessions, what comes to your mind? I'm sorry, monks. Yes. All right. So did they have to become monks? No, they didn't have to. But what they were asked to do is to become part of the church. And what's the most important thing that church can do? Pray. So the main thing, and we'll get into this a little further, especially with the apostolic constitutions, the main thing was to pray there, but they were also to do intercession. So they were to pray for other people. Yeah. I don't know if it was much as off to themselves as spending time that could be alone, okay, but having a peace and a demeanor about you that would help others when you go to visit them, when you pray for them, that they would want to come to you. Now, it does mean you have to spend time alone in prayer. Don't get me wrong. So that's the solitude. But I think the key to it is to get that disposition to help other people. Graciousness, that's a good word. Good word. Enrollment as an official widow involved a lifelong pledge of celibacy and commitment to a lifestyle of holiness. A life commitment of celibacy and commitment to a lifestyle. St. Polycarp later wrote to the Philippians and described the widows as God's altar. I found that interesting. God's altar. Why do you think he would say that? Yes, Jordan.
Like if they're like still in prayer, committing themselves to like the holiness, and you know how we think of the mass, it's like they become so sanctified and they're like just living in the spirit all the time.
Yeah.
Like God.
Yeah, constantly in prayer, constantly living in the spirit, trying to do the will of God. In other words, we are lifting up our prayers to them because they are interceding for us. Okay. Yes, no, this was just widows, but it almost like was the beginning of what you would say is a monastic thing. Yeah. Yes. Yep. Yep. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. That Sanders calls them the original nuns. That's a good way of putting it. And I'm sorry. That's correct. Yeah. 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 Okay, now. Well, then they wouldn't be called a widow if they weren't married. Right. In other words, if they, yeah, that would be a different system. Yeah. Yeah. This one was mainly for the ones who were married. Now, my guess would be that they would require the families to help the others like that. I don't know, maybe when you think about it, maybe there were not enough women who were not married to have an office in the church for that. I don't know. That's a good question. Yeah, the idea was to get married. Yeah, and so there probably was a small group of people compared to the most women who married. Yeah. Okay, moving on. I know, but it does sound like the beginning of what you would call a monastic life, because the encouragement of prayer, intercession, solitude, Now, don't forget, we're going to get in. Well, I don't want to go down that road yet because it's an answer to a question I have. So we'll talk about why we're looking at these people. All right, widows were thus the visible embodiment of the church's prayerful devotion to God. They were the embodiment. However, some in Ephesus were abusing this noble office. Surprise, surprise. Some widows were being supported who could well have been supported by their own families. The axiom, charity begins at home. And we're going to talk about this. Other widows were being enrolled when they were young and later deciding to remarry. Their pledge of celibacy notwithstanding, others spent their time going from house to house, seeming to pray for the distressed, but also to spread gossip. Surprise, surprise. The institution of church widows was in danger of falling into disrepute, and something needed to be done. Now, is there a role for the office of widows in the church today? George?
I mean, the most obvious thing we talked about was like the nuns.
Yeah.
But I think, just from like what I've seen, there's a lot of other places in the church for, elderly women or especially little women to like have life. A lot of like I've seen like a lot of saints there at nuns where they were like spiritual mothers. Like, okay, they were always at their parish like every day of the week. And they had a bunch of spiritual children. They were very involved. So it's like they wouldn't be at home alone all the time, even if they weren't a nun or a dedicated widow like how these ladies were.
Yeah. And today we have different organizations too within the church that fulfilled this to a certain extent. For example, our first parish, it was called the Sunshine Committee. And it was arranged so that people would go out, not only for widows, but generally a lot of them were the elderly and who were home alone. And they would take them, gifts at Christmas, Easter, check with them, see what they needed, etc. So now the next thing that you could surmise from this is what office of the priesthood could we revive to take care of this if you wanted to make an official office? Deaconess. Exactly, Hernan. Deaconess. When you think about it, the deaconess would be the person who would probably coordinate this very well. And it's almost like that would be the equivalent in a regular parish of what you would have for nuns at a monastery. And so, again, have the needs changed at all when you think about it? No. We have the same needs that they had in the early church. Maybe they're a little differently expressed or whatever, but for most part, we still have the elderly, we still have the sick, we still have those being catechized, we still have the same situations that we had in the early church. Question becomes, how do we then minister to those needs? Verse 3 states, honor widows who are really, really widows. Indeed, who are widows. That is, ones who have become alone and destitute. They're looking at those really in need. Ones without any other support. Now, what does Paul say about family members regarding their role with widows?
Well, in the one verse you're saying that people who don't take care of their old household are worse than unbelievers.
Okay, so in other words, where do you go first for support? To the family. To the family. How many of you know situations where that has worked well in today's world? Mm-hmm. How many of you know where it has not worked well? What prevents it from working well in today's environment?
Family, period.
Okay, when you say breakdown, what specifically would you say?
Children brought up not to know the Christian faith, to care about anybody but themselves.
So a lack of spiritual and guidance and faith development. Okay, very good. Nick?
Can't hear him.
Okay,
So I was saying, I feel
thank
like,
you.
specifically with older people or in-laws these days, people feel like they want their privacy and don't want to have them living in the same home.
Good point. In other words, I value my privacy and I want to hold that above taking care of. Very good. Very good. What else? Yes, Mike, go ahead.
Also, the over epito- epitomizing of the nuclear family. So one of the things that the nuclear family did, among the many great things that it did, is it cut off the relationship with the extended family.
Yes. Yep. Okay. Yes, Kristen?
I think also, I'm experiencing this currently in my own family right now. One member of the family doesn't do anything for the other. They serve no purpose.
Yep. So you don't have a good marital relationship perhaps to begin with, and that affects the children and everybody else.
Yeah. Or also, in the current situation, my dad and his mother.
Yeah. Okay.
He
Okay.
doesn't do anything for me.
Yeah.
So why am I gonna do anything? for
Yeah.
her?
Yeah. I hate to say it, it's go back. What's in it for me again? It's the
Pretty
pride.
much.
Yes, Sandra.
I was going to say, financially,
Oh, yeah. Yes. Can you hear her, by the way? Those of you on Zoom? Okay. So speak into it closer. Yeah. Yeah. If you're going to look at me, then it'll be good to use that one. Yeah.
Is it on?
Oh, below one power? Oh, okay.
I was saying I was visiting my husband's sister this weekend, and
Right.
she's, very high level of care needs. So we reach a
Yes.
point where we can care for our elders, but then we can't, and
Yes.
we need skilled care. And
Right.
it's very difficult for a family to offer that to their loved ones. So financially, we just don't make it easy
That's a good
in
point.
this world today to
That
offer up that level of care.
Yeah, that's a good point, Sandra. You have a financial consideration. You also have a physical or mental consideration where people cannot function too well, so they need maybe like a visiting nurse or something, which one comes into finances, etc. So there and what's the big thing with people today? What is different today than perhaps existed at that time in terms of length? Longevity is we're going into the 90s and hundreds now. No. The family is not, is spread out. Family is spread out. And sometimes what happens, if you have 3 or 4 children, to whom usually does the responsibility of taking the parents fall? The older daughter. Isn't it interesting that you started out by saying, first of all, the female, the daughter, and then secondly, the older daughter? That may or may not be the case, in all families, but it does seem, why do you think it falls on the female side rather than the male side? Josh? Oh, yeah, that is true. Yeah, normally, I don't know if it's still the case, don't get me wrong, but it used to be where the daughter who was getting married, that family would be the one that was required to pay for it. And whereas the other, the man would not, the husband would not. Yes, to Poe. Yeah, I used to, yeah,
My older brother-in-laws live with them,
yes,
and they, the parents always talk about how it was much more comfortable for them to live with their daughter because of the communication and she provide more cares.
yes,
And it's easier for the mom and dad to adjust to
yes.
because like the house is usually ruled by a woman, and they just said that it's easier to.
I can verify that,
Yeah.
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 Yeah, so for in your situation, it was just natural.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was just natural. Yeah, I think, I don't know, I can't speak for everybody, but I've seen that quite often. Now I've seen situations where it was the husband and wife helping out and they try to do the best they can. And it always takes two, don't get me wrong, but the primary seemed to be always the wife. Yes. Or daughter.
Taking care of like the elderly family member, having a woman do it is the same, kind of falls in the same category of like how you would say typically the woman would take care of the kids more.
Yeah. Use that. Okay. You can't, yeah, just speak up if you could, Georgie.
Like how a woman would typically take care of the kids more. It's the
Yeah.
same thing, when people get elderly, it's almost like they need care, just like how kids need care. So
Yeah,
everyone's taking care of the kids, it's the same thing.
yeah, it's the same thing. We're in taking care of the kids and then taking care of the, now, I would say, and those of you who have relatives in Greece or in other Burma or anywhere else, in the past, I think you had more generations living under one roof. You probably had a grandparent, then the parents, and then the grandchildren or whatever. Those days, I think, for the most part, are gone, at least in the United States. I don't know how it is still in Greece or these other places that you may have traveled to or have come from. How about in, Azalea, where are you from? Yeah, how was it there? Yeah. We got new batteries now, right, Mike? Good.
Hispanic families
Yes.
tend to stick together.
Hispanic families tend to stick together.
Yeah, they don't like. I know like a lot of like in Americans, like once you turn 18, you're kind of like on your own.
Uh-huh.
You live out, you
Yes.
like live on your own stuff, but Hispanic people are not like that.
Yeah. And why is that? Is it just a cultural
I
thing?
think it's a culture thing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think you're right. And how did you find that? What was the advantages and what were any disadvantages?
The disadvantage is like, well, I'm an older daughter too, so like kind of like hold the responsibility of
Yes.
having to like take care of them for the rest of your life.
Right.
But then an advantage is like you always have a support system.
Right. Yeah. Very good. Yeah. What we have today is similar but different, I guess is the way we could put it. All right. Let's continue there. Verse 8 states, if anyone does not provide for his own, especially for those of his household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. Why do you think St. Paul uses such strong language here? Yes, go ahead, Kevin.
I would say because since God is love,
Yes.
one of the ways that he showed his love was by self-sacrifice,
Yes.
which was by him dying on the cross for us.
Mhm.
So if we believe in Jesus, we ought to show that same self-sacrifice with our household
Exactly.
by providing for them and sacrificing ourselves for them.
Very good. Very good. Georgia?
It's also because like if you're a believer, then you have that moral set. And
Yes.
you know that that's what you're supposed to be doing and you know that that was right, but you're purposely going against it, whereas the unbeliever doesn't have that moral set, so they're not going against anything.
Okay, that's a good point. And what you're saying here is if you're a believer, that should be part of your value mindset. If you're an unbeliever, it may not be. But if you are and you don't do it, then we will be held more responsible. It's just like those of us who now know Christ, have a Bible, have come into the church, consider ourselves Orthodox Christians, we are going to be held accountable for that, as opposed to somebody else who may not have, been in the church, still have their own, as we studied in Romans, the natural law. But I think it's important. Yes, Hernan. Okay, go ahead, Kristen.
So I sent my mom a picture of the scripture from today, and I was like, ouch, with this particular
Yes.
section.
Yes.
She's like, it's just talking about widows in context, right? And I was like, well, I think it could apply to anybody.
Yes.
She's like, that's a question, hint, hint. I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, I'll ask.
Yeah.
Could it be, is it just for taking care of widows, or could it be the man of the house failing to take care of
Yeah.
the remaining of?
It's any believer when you think about it. It's any believer. If we all have a responsibility, whether you're a son or a daughter, to do the best you can. And if you call yourself a Christian, you have that value mindset. Hernan.
Genesis, the image of God.
Yes.
Is the unity of people. And apparently this is the reflection of what we see the Trinity in Genesis 1:26, 1:27. It says, let us make man, referring to humanity in
Right.
our image.
Yep.
And then we see male and female, he created them.
Yes.
We see the multiplicity there. Then we see a lot of people talk about Adam and Eve becoming one flesh, husband and wife. But it's not just a husband and wife in unity, because the husband and wife creates life,
Right.
which is what the image of God is. And it's any type of unity, not marriage, not just marriage.
Right.
It's the unity of friendship, siblings. And what we see in Genesis is like the break of the image of God, because every story that comes afterwards, there's
Yeah.
a separation of siblings
Mhm.
that start to rival each other.
Mhm.
And that is like the breaking of the image of God. So if
Mhm.
these people are not going to take care of their family for this to keep that unity, they're actually going the opposite of what the image of God is, and that would be worse than an unbeliever, because you're actually making choices that would actually completely break the image of God.
And I like the word you used there, unity. When we think of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, we think of three persons as one. And so what happens is this is fodder for the devil. What does he want to do? Is like what you said, break that unity and separate. And that's what he does there, unfortunately.
And it's like, you know, like a lion out in the safari or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Serengeti, yeah, there you go. You know, like the herd will be together, and he like picks on the one that's the weakest,
Yeah.
and gets it alone.
Yep, exactly. You separate it. Yep. What did Jesus do for his mother when he was about to be crucified?
You appointed someone to take care of
Who was that he appointed? John. And what did he say to his mother? And what did he say to John?
son, your mother.
Yeah. This is your mother, and to him or to her, this is your son. And it is believed that that is where Mary went then. Very interestingly, one of the disciples stepped up. And so it was John, as it says in the scripture, the beloved. Yes, Hernan. Yes. Yes. And that's a good point. And where are we talking about? Where's Timothy? In Ephesus. Yes. Jose. Take your time, think of it, and we'll come back to it. It's hard because you have your mind thinking of what other people are saying at the same time. All right, let's, Mike, you want to read 9 to 10 there? 5, 9 to 10. Oh, I'm sorry. Did I miss something here? Yeah, so let's read the footnote there on bottom of page 163745. Yeah, Mike, why don't you read the footnote first? On page 1637.
Advice on caring for widows. Specific advice on caring for widows. If there are no family members to do this, care belongs to the parish, for a widow has God as her guardian. A real widow, however, in turn cares for the parish through prayer and works of compassion while maintaining a pure and holy life. Special qualifications are given for those who are on the register of widows. Perhaps this was an order for charitable service. Widows have from the start constituted a definable group within the church.
You know, it's interesting, ironically, is I was on the website today, both the Greek Archdiocese and the Orthodox Church in America, and they just had a conference. They have had actually 5 different priests speak on different topics, and the group that they were addressing were the clergy widows. The clergy widows. You'd be surprised how many of them there are. You don't think about that. I know in the Greek Archdiocese, Denise, you want to talk about how they were trying to help the clergy widows because what?
Society for the clergy widows, and part of it helped not only the clergy, but serve having any kind of retirement
Yes.
or
Yeah.
anything like that. And then when they got too old to serve, they have nothing. They don't have, of course, they don't have a home because a lot of them lived like in the parish home. So then they're out and nowhere to go. And then once their husbands die, then the widows are in a worse situation. Philopticus does a lot to support the
Correct.
the widows.
That's
and
correct.
I think twice a year we do things for the Sisterhood of Presbyteras to help the
Right. You have to use the mic.
Sorry. For a long time, nothing was done
Right.
for these widows.
No. And that's the point, Marcos, and what Denise said too, is when you look at the people who served before the retirement system or started a mission church and they met in a house and went and started out, it wasn't the easiest. And depending on whether they had a family that supported them or not, was another issue. So it's come a long way, but there's still people out there, like you said, that are still in need. Okay. Thank you. Now the other Michael is going to read. Let's read verses 9 to 10.
Do not let a widow under 60 years old be taken into the number, and not unless she has been the wife of one man, well reported for good works, if she has brought up children, if she has lodged strangers, if she had washed the saints' feet, if she has relieved the afflicted, if she has diligently followed every good work.
Okay, let's go. Represent the church. In addition to being financial, 60. Several thoughts here. One, if under 60, she could still and get age, unquote, from work, and for the Jews' old age. After 60 years, her sensual passions are not as great, and she will not be able to bear children. And for the age 6 in Mosaic law. Let's turn to page 158. We're going to look at Leviticus chapter 27, verses 1 to 7. 58. The title here of this section is Laws Concerning Gifts Dedicated to God. Now the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the children of Israel and say to them, when a man vows a vow to the Lord equivalent evaluate
Father, your microphone's going in and out.
Oh, my microphone's going in and out. Okay. We're gonna. Oh, okay. All right, thank you. All right, let me know if it's any better now. Okay. All right, continuing there. And if 5 years old, up to 20 years old, your valuation for a male shall be 20 didrachma, and for a female, 10 didrachma. And if a month old, up to 5 years old, for valuation for a male shall be 5 didrachma of silver, and for a female, 3 of silver. And if 60 years old and above, it is, if it is a male, then your valuation shall be 15 didrachma, and for a female, 10. You notice the 60 keep coming up time and again. Now, let's go down and look at the footnote. The subject matter of this chapter is quite different from the rest of the book. It deals with voluntary vows made to God not called for in the law. However, such vows were not prohibited. One could choose to make vows, and if he did, there were terms and conditions governing them. There is likely little typological value in these vows. Further, no vows are called for in the new covenant. However, some choose to make vows to God. These are not forbidden, though it is important we not imagine that we curry grace with God by making them. Perhaps above all, we must be aware that if we should make a vow to God, we must follow through in keeping it. When you make a vow to God, do not delay to pay it, for he has no pleasure in fools. Pay what you have vowed. Better not to vow than to vow and not pay, as we hear in Ecclesiastes 5:4-5. Now, think about some couples who made a vow to God. Okay. Parents of Samuel. Who else? Parents. Keep along the line the same way with parents. Who else? Nick? Parents of John the Baptist and Abraham and I'm sorry. Parents of Mary. Yeah. Joachim and Anna. So what happens here is they made a vow. And what did Joachim and Anna say they would do if they received the child, i.e. Mary? Dedicated. And at what age was she dedicated into the temple? 3 years old. Can you imagine going into the temple at 3 years old? Yes. For the parent, exactly. Now, as it says here, vows can be made, but if you're going to make a vow, then you better what? Keep it. Now, what is meant by this? It is important that we should make a vow to God, excuse me. It is important we not imagine that we curry grace with God by making them. What does that mean? Tina? Speak to them. Oh, yeah. Okay. You don't expect something in return. What happens if you don't get what you want? I'm sorry? You have no expectation, then you don't have to worry. Now, you make a vow, and I don't know if any of you have ever done this, but it goes something like this. God, if you do this for me, I will do this for you. Now, what is a problem with that?
That's not how it works.
Why is it not how it works, Kevin?
It comes from a form of entitlement, as if
Okay,
God
it
owes
comes
us
from an
anything.
entitlement. And what can you not do with God? Bargain. You can't tell him what to do. Now, is it still wrong, though, to not make a vow or to make a vow? No, you could still make the vow, but don't put it in, I want this and therefore you owe me. You know, if I come through or if you come through, I'll do this. You don't, it's the mindset. It's how you approach him. All right. Now, I think one thing I would say is this. I know a situation where somebody's in a very difficult physical predicament right now, and that person is making a decision to get some special treatment. All right. The one thing you cannot do is say, well, if you get me through this, you know, I will do this, unless you really mean it. But you would have to say it in a way, Lord, I love you so much. I appreciate all you've done for me. I'd rather just say it's something like this. If it is your will, let me be healed physically. If it is not, let me accept that and still glorify and praise you. You see the difference on that. It's still, I would like this to happen. We can, in one sense, always pray specifically for something, but always end it with, if this is better for my salvation, if this is your will. And that's the key to it. Josh.
What's the difference between like a vow? Because I know in sermon on the mount, this is like, don't swear, or just let your guesses be yes. So what's kind of like the thing that separates like swearing to the Lord, making an oath to the Lord, making a vow?
Okay, good question. Hernan, go ahead.
Swearing, like, increase their credibility. So they would say, I swear on God, I swear on this, I swear on that, in order to manipulate that in order to kind of boast that they're a credible person, you should trust them. So what Jesus is saying, you're not to do that. You let your yes be yes, your no be no. Your credibility should be within your actions, not by adding anything to it. So,
I don't know about you, but I always think of it, the courtroom. You swear to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help me God, you know, and how many people have taken that differently? Yes, Marcos.
Picking up on what you said about, which I perceive you basically were talking to God and in a contrite manner in which
I do this, you do that.
not a deal.
Right. You can't
Not a
deal
deal.
with God.
But since we're on the subject, I think that it's real important. It's something I'm writing about right now. And I hope I can do it justice, but I think that the young people of this country, I think the most important thing is to have a Christ-centered life.
Mhm.
And we are at a turning point
Mhm.
like it's never been for a long time. I believe that young people should be challenged and make a vow to God to not marry until it is two people who are Christ-centered.
Yeah.
I think that is the biggest problem we got, maybe.
I think before you can make that vow, you have to come to know Christ.
Well, I'm talking about people who are Christ.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah. I think that, you need to have, and it talks about, being yoked one to another. So you want to have this similar value system. That's why, the premarital counseling, I could honestly say I have, did a blessing of engagement rings recently, and I have a wedding this Saturday, as a matter of fact, and then another one coming up in January. I was impressed with the premarital counseling I did with these people. And these are young people. And I'm not impressed with myself doing the count, don't get me wrong. These people, these people, I'm sorry. Oh, hey, could you hear me or not? Oh, does somebody want to talk? Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring up the importance of gratitude. I think if you're going to make a vow to God, it should be done in gratitude.
Yes.
Because God gives us blessings. He provides miracles in our life every single day. And we probably don't even notice how many he actually does.
That's right.
I think it's an incredible amount if we even notice even a fraction of it. And so vows made in gratitude, I think, venerate God and what he does for us all the time. And it's a way to kind of try to give back to him that which is among the most precious to him, sincerity. And a vow is meant to be sincere. It's meant to be, as serious a thing as you can possibly do. And so I think that God would place a tremendous value on that, and thus you would incur a great deal of wrath should you fall short of that commitment.
Good point. Very good point. We always talk about the attitude of gratitude. And I think we always have to start with that, because everything we have is from above. Every perfect gift, as we say in the liturgy, is from above, and all we can do is thank him for that. Somebody else? Yes, Hernan? Yes.
It's if we are
Mm-hmm.
well, I do this and then you do that. It's almost you're indirectly defining what is good to begin with.
Yes.
And although we may be right sometimes, we're
Right.
not 100% right on that.
Good point.
The other thing is his mind, his knowledge doesn't change based on actions that we do or anything
Right.
like that. Well, he doesn't change.
He's the same yesterday, today, and forever.
He is always good.
Yeah.
What we perceive as change is really our movement towards him or away from him.
That's correct.
So when we're making a vow, it should never be if you're going to bargain, you're number one, automatically defining what is good in your eyes.
Mhm.
And that's not always the case. Sometimes
Right.
what's good, you may have to go through some suffering or whatever the case is. And it's not something you wanted to begin with.
Right.
And then number two, God's mind doesn't, it's a misunderstanding to begin with.
Mhm.
To toward God and to do his will, not necessarily. So when like the prayer you were saying is perfect because it's express what you
Right.
his
Regardless. Yes. You're totally right. I like what you said, where he is the same there. He's a stable rock. We have to either come closer to him or draw away. That's our choice. But he is going to remain the same. And like you said, regardless, we will most importantly want his will to be done. And it's going to happen regardless of what we bargain for or ask for. Yeah. Okay. Let's go back now to page 1638. Oh, the marriage counseling. What I was impressed with was, number one, these couples took things seriously. And what was good about it is, in one case, I received the young man into the church. He was not Orthodox. So they both came for his instructions. And she said, I've learned more now, even though I grew up Orthodox. And so that brought them closer there. And then with everything else, we went through a lot of Orthodox stuff, and now we went through the premarital counseling. One of the things I like to use is that little 70 questionnaire that we talk about with, it's a personality inventory. And you look at whether you're 4 areas of your life, if you're extroverted and introverted, whether you perceive things or whether you're sensible. There's these 4 areas, and the what would you call it? The idea behind everything is that, to a certain extent, opposites attract, but also if you're too different, it's not good. And if you're too much alike, it may not be good. It's almost like magnets. You need a positive and a negative, or is that right? Magnet? Yeah, to attract. So, you know, you don't be both, positive in a sense and negative. But I was just impressed with younger people because I felt that they could come in just to get married to move on. In fact, this other one, they're in the young adult group and involved in sometimes on the Bible study. So I think that we sometimes write people off, or at least not write them off, but we think of the younger generation. And with this younger generation, at least with these couples I worked with, I was pleasantly surprised.
That's helpful.
Yeah, it's hopeful. Yeah. Okay, let's move on here for the bullet on second bullet on page 3. The widow must have been the wife of one husband. In an age when the marriage bond was taken lightly and almost universally dishonored, she must be an example of purity and fidelity. It was not uncommon for people to just leave and remarry or go after people without marrying them, etc. at that time. She must have done good works. The Apostolic Constitutions, a church order written in Syria about 380, specifies 3 widows shall be appointed, 2 to persevere in prayer. That was the main thing, prayer. 2 out of 3 in prayer. For those who are in temptations, and for the reception of revelations when such are necessary, but 1 to assist women who are visited with sickness. She must be ready for service, discreet, telling the others what is necessary, not avaricious, not given to much love of wine, so that she may be sober and able to perform the night services and other loving duties. That was written in the early Constitution. So nothing's changed. If she washed the feet of the saints' feet, that was another criteria, meaning she welcomed Christians into her home. Washing the feet of visitors was standard practice in those dusty days. She brought up her children. This meant both the raising of one's own children and the receiving of abandoned infants, which were all too common in the ancient world. In an age when the marriage bond was very lax and men and women changed their partners with bewildering rapidity, children were regarded as a misfortune. When a child was born, it was brought and laid before the father's feet. If the father stooped and lifted the child, that meant that he acknowledged it and was prepared to accept responsibility for its upbringing. If the father turned and walked away, the child was quite literally thrown out like an unwanted piece of rubbish. It often happened that such unwanted children were collected by unscrupulous people, and if they were girls, brought up to stock the public brothels. If they were boys, they were trained to be slaves or gladiators for the public games. It would be a Christian duty to rescue such children from death and worse than death, and to bring them up in a Christian home. So this may mean that widows must be women who have been prepared to give a home to abandoned children. Now, how does the society of Timothy's time compare to what we have occurring in our society today? What are the similarities? What are any differences? Georgia? Use the mic again.
like they didn't view marriage as very like sacred or permanent,
Uh-huh.
and a lot of like, absentee fathers.
Yeah. We have a lot of absentee fathers today, and you have sometimes a lot of children being born and then divorce and then remarriage and then a lack of support there. Okay. Anything else? Yes.
I would say like for even like the fates of the children are still similar. Like maybe nobody's, well, sometimes there, but in speaking very generally, maybe nobody's like straight up kidnapping them, taking them to a public brothel, or to be, a violent man like a gladiator. But they typically grow up in that pattern. Women in promiscuity and men in violence and
Yep.
stuff.
And so you have that men violence situation. You have a lot of human trafficking today. That to me is probably, at least what I see, getting worse and worse. And I don't care what country you're in. I remember, people I knew in Georgia, and they would tell me about situations over in, for example, the Far East. And then you hear about, of course, in the drug cartels and everything else. Yes, Josh.
Obviously, I feel like the similarity I see is, abortion. Instead of abandoning
Yes.
the kid after it's born,
Yeah.
you abandon them in the womb.
Yep, exactly. So abortion today is readily available, etc. Okay, any other comments before we move on? Okay, Timothy is to what the young widows? Refuse the young widows. Why does Paul say this? Yes, Nick?
Because they were able to remarry or work to take care of themselves.
Yeah, very good. They were still young enough they could remarry or they could work for themselves. All right. He says it better for them to remarry. Yes, Georgia.
I think it's, he was saying it's important for them to remarry.
Yes.
Because it's kind of like gives them like a sense of normalcy again. I think like it's important for like everybody to have like a sense of normalcy in their life.
Yes.
If you're, if there's like a young woman, she's like only in her 20s or maybe even only like 30, and they try to throw her in the widow group, there's a bunch of very elderly women, and it'll be like, all this woman lived a life and in a normal way, and she never did. Whereas she's still capable not only physically in sense of childbearing, but also just like emotionally and spiritually and stuff.
So it's a different situation with the younger ones compared to the older ones. And I like your comment there about that normalcy. People want to have whatever you want to define as a normal. I think I would call it stability, a stable life. Yes.
Like, and if she doesn't have that, she's not, it's going to be a lot harder for her to be successful. Keeping with the faith or just living, keep using the word over like normally.
Right.
It's like the widows, it's like, they're in a completely different circumstance, but if you're trying to like take a 20-year-old girl and make her live like an 80-year-old,
right,
even if she's not trying to fight against it, it's going to be much harder.
Exactly. And we're going to talk a little about something else here that comes up along those lines. Kristen?
Then you have the opposite. You've got the ones that have been married and then have decided, well, it didn't work the first time, so I'm not gonna, so I'm just gonna bounce around from guy to guy to guy.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, I have a friend that has unfortunately decided to live this way as well.
Yeah.
And her and I had a very in-depth conversation when she told me that she was pregnant, and then decided that to tell me, someone who wants a child, that she was going to abort it.
Yeah.
It's like, why did you tell me this?
Yeah, right. Yeah. 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 It's interesting. Well, I there's something I read today, but I won't go into that, but along the same lines, but that's okay. Let me go on here. Moving right along. The first bullet under B. Paul did not condemn young widows for wanting to get married, only observing that many unmarried women are so hungry for marriage and companionship that they do not conduct themselves in a godly way in regard to relationships. Many people get into a bad romance because they are desperately needy for a. Okay. Is this still the case today? Okay. I think, in my estimation, what generally results in a situation like that? Jose. I'm sorry? The couple is not good for each other. Would you say, and there's no right or wrong answer here, okay? Would you say that women look more for a relationship or men, or is it equal? Okay, equal.
depends on demographics.
It depends on the demographics. Yeah. George?
I don't know. I think it varies a lot.
Yeah. I don't think there's any equal answer. Yes. Mark. It does. Yeah. Yeah. I would say for most people, I think people need a relationship. They need a relationship between, let's say, parents and children, brothers and sisters, husband and wife, or boyfriend, girlfriend. I think for the most part, fewer people are called to live a solitary life. If you're called to live a solitary life, i.e. monastic life, etc., please do it. But I would say that most of us look for community. We look for relationships. We look for a gathering. Kevin.
You brought up monasticism. I think that's a huge mystery, because of just how hard it is, to be by yourself. So I think people that are in the monasticism, that's a huge mystery that God has given to them.
Yeah, it's that's a good point. Monasticism is a huge mystery, but even in the monastery, there are relationships. You still need people. We are social beings. And I find that out because I can't tell you how many people, and you probably have gone through this yourself. Just start talking, and if you show any interest, a person will reveal their soul to you. They will reveal, and you don't have to be a clergyman for this. I'm not talking about that. It could be the caller could turn somebody off or could allow them to feel open toward you. But I would say that if you have a good listening ear, you'd be surprised what people, they want to share and they want to have, because that relationship, they want somebody to understand what they are going through. And I think that's very important. So it's very important to have, what do we call it in the church today? A spiritual father. So think of it in a spiritual friend that you would have, non-clergy. It's good to have, if you can, have a close person that you can trust. Marcos.
Thank you.
Use the mic.
Oh, I'm sorry. I forget about it. I think you hit the nail on the head there, because that goes along with what I was always taught, and that is to be comfortable in your relationship with Jesus Christ, and He is number one.
Right.
And that unless we have that, it's just like I said earlier, we shouldn't go looking till we have that and can be okay to be alone.
Yeah. I totally agree with you. I think just like prayer and so forth, every night pray to God, pray to Him, etc. But there's something about a fellow human being, flesh and blood. And the one thing that you do is you make yourself vulnerable. And when you can be vulnerable, you can be open.
We go too soon before we have the ability to stand on our own and to be alone. Then we're needy.
Yeah.
We're looking for somebody to fill our needs.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you have to have, Georgia?
I mean, both times that I've been to the Orthodoxy 101 classes and Father Stavros talks about sacramental marriage, he always used the words "people are needy," and he's not saying it in a bad way. He's
No.
saying that's just reality. And
That's true.
said, like, if I wasn't needy, I wouldn't be married.
Yeah.
But I am needy, and when I leave for conferences, I need to take my wife with me.
Yeah.
Like that. So I don't think it's necessarily wrong to be needy. It's just if you're expressing that need in unhealthy way.
Appropriately. Yeah. It's all right to be. In fact, a lot of people will not make changes until they're in need of change. And so I would say it's okay to be needy in a positive sense, as long as it doesn't get out of hand. Yeah. Okay. Yes, Sandra.
Say
Father?
we all need
Yes. Hold on, Sandra. Go ahead. Jim.
Yeah, Father, along these lines, there's a kind of a documentary. It's called The Blue Zone. And I don't know if anybody, it's usually on Netflix, and it's about a fellow who goes to different areas of the world where people are living to be over 100 years old. And the demographics on each area are way different. But what he found out, kind of unscientifically, is that it was the socialization that kept these people going into their old age. So, for example, if there was a widow, the people in the village would go to that house and they would bring food and they would sing songs and things of that nature. And he found that in different cultures. And so I think the socialization is we talk about older people, most of them are widows, and most of them, unfortunately, were women, is that bringing the people together and socializing with them, not leaving them alone to think about, well, this is the end. I can't socialize. We can't do anything. It's called the Blue Zone. So if anybody wants to see it, I won't go too much into it. And I think it was on Netflix, a very good unscientific thing about socialization and people who live to be long years in life.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, Jim. I appreciate that. And, you start going back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, one is part of the socialization. So I could see where that's important. Tina. Is the mic on? Yes.
And the people that had survived through that period.
Yes.
They truly knew that they needed the support of each other.
Yes.
And so there was this love.
You're right.
And my father and his brother, that love was just incredible.
Incredible.
We saw them fight and they will do whatever they could for each other. And so that the love, which is willingness to sacrifice for others, I think is tremendously strong. If we can figure out as a society how to actually put that to use, I think all of these problems that that have been really throughout the centuries that have been following us will go away.
Yes.
But it's very hard to let that transactional relationship go and just give.
You're right.
And give without
Sacrifice.
expecting
That's right.
something in return.
Yeah.
And so I'm looking.
It's still happening today. Yes, you're right.
But I hope
I know. You pray.
and I hope and pray that we have the periods where we do share. So that's
And what I would say too, what you mentioned and think of the 9/11, sometimes it takes a crisis to bring people together. Sandra, you were going to say something.
Back to the one-on-one relationship.
Yes.
We need an accountability partner.
Right.
To say, like,
Good point.
You can have a relationship with God and be solo, but you're not getting the feedback often. And,
At least not verbally.
Right. Live day to day. And, I don't want to say if your partner's not calling you out, but you need a friend, a spouse, someone you can tell people that
You're
are
right.
lifelong singles that don't,
You're right.
they're in their own echo chamber.
Yes.
See, that's what the church is doing.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be alone, something like off in the desert. I think that people should not get married until they can stand on their own to be in body of believers.
Yeah. I think the accountability is the key. Yeah. I think the accountability is true. We need people to hold us accountable. It could be a spouse, it could be somebody else, etc. But I think that all goes together with that. Okay. Paul did not condemn a young widow's desire for romantic companionship, but he insisted that it be pursued and expressed in the purity that should mark all believers. Paul sums up by saying that the church must take care of true widows. If any faithful woman, that is a woman believer, has widows in the family, let her aid them and support them. The church's resources should be saved so that it may aid the ones who are indeed widows, the ones desolate and relying on God. Now, I never thought of this until I read Timothy about how much he wrote about widows. Paul wrote to him about widows. And he does this, with other things, the elders. But what it reminds me of is it's very practical. And it still exists today. It's still important. And it's still important for the church to address. We're going to stop here because we're going to get into another area right now with the care for elders that I want to finish off next week. Any comments from anybody on Zoom or anybody here that wants to discuss anything? Okay, before you leave, I want to mention that I'm going to pass these out. On December the 7th, which is a Saturday, the first Saturday in December, I have a a retreat that's going to be held in Sarasota. It'll be with Father Dan Suciu coming in from San Antonio, retired Greek Orthodox priest from Romania originally. I've told you about him. We're starting with morning prayer at 9, light breakfast 9:30. He'll have his first presentation entitled To Heaven Together, to Hell Alone, an Orthodox perspective on salvation. We'll have a discussion after that, lunch, and then a second presentation, Suffering, Not a Tragedy, but an Opportunity. And he can speak to that very well. December the 7th, it's a Saturday. And the discussion after that, Vespers and conclusion. Don't worry, I'm going to pass these out. So if you're interested, what we need to do is we started Sunday, and I'm going to, for this Sunday and the next one, go ahead and have people sign up, because we need to know how much food to prepare for the lunch. And we have a woman there who's going to prepare from her restaurant spaghetti and salad for lunch, and we'll have a light continental breakfast for in the morning. But it's an opportunity if you'd like to come and share in fellowship. It's during the Nativity Fast, so you're more than welcome. Kevin. No, the bishop, ironically, is going to be there on the 3rd of December for the Vesper service, and then on the 4th for St. Barbara Feast Day. He'll be coming from Miami. He's going to be in Miami for St. Andrew. Then he's coming to Sarasota on the 3rd and the 4th. Okay, and then that's that weekend. This Father Dan will arrive on Friday, the 6th, and then 7th is the retreat, and he'll serve with me on Sunday the 8th and deliver the sermon that day.
Father, can you email me that? I'll pass it on to
Yes.
the Hepper and the Daughters of Penelope.
Okay, I appreciate that, Jim. What I'll do is I'll give it to our secretary and send it out to everybody on the Bible study list.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
She just answered. It was Sebastianos.
Yeah, Sebastian is coming. All right, let's stand. We'll finish with prayer. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, the Holy Spirit. Amen. We thank you, Lord our God, that again on this occasion, you have opened our eyes to the light of your wisdom. You have gladdened our hearts with the knowledge of truth. We entreat you, Lord, help us always to do your will. Bless our souls and bodies, our words and deeds. Enable us to grow in grace, virtue, and good habits, that your name may be glorified. Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, now and forever. Amen. Have a good week.